In the shadows of Charlotte, North Carolina, a predator moved unseen through the city streets, cloaked by the animosity of night and the trust he cultivated amongst his victims. Henry Louis Wallace, known as the Taco Bell Strangler, concealed his true nature behind a facade of friendliness and reliability. Wallace was born to a single mother on November 4, 1965, in Barnwell, South Carolina. Wallace graduated from Barnwell High School in 1983, enlisted in the U.S. Navy in 1985, and was honorably discharged in 1988. Between 1990 and 1994, Wallace brutally murdered 11 young black women, primarily in Charlotte, North Carolina, and one in Barnwell, South Carolina. His victims were often acquaintances or friends, making his betrayal all the more devastating. Tashonda Bethea was an 18-year-old high school student from Charlotte, North Carolina that went missing on March 8, 1990. Her body was found on April 1st in the lake of her hometown by two fishermen. She was strangled, sexually assaulted, and had her wrist slit after she was already deceased. Here's the thing. On April 2nd, 1990, a little under a month after Tashonda's death, Wallace was arrested in a motel room while holding a 16-year-old girl hostage at gunpoint. He was charged with second-degree criminal sexual conduct for that crime, and Wallace was questioned about Tashonda, and he confessed. However, due to lack of evidence, police did not charge him with this crime, and he was out less than 2 years later. Police had another chance to catch and maybe even stop Wallace when he left the survivor alive by the name of Kibra Lewis on February 21st, 1992. Kibra Lewis accepted a ride to a Rock Hill lounge. The problem was, the ride was offered by Wallace. Although only acquaintances, Lewis knew and trusted Wallace. Once in the car, he made his intentions very clear. Lewis tried to jump out of the moving car, but Wallace threatened her with the gun. Once on a dead-end street in the wooded Country Downs neighborhood, he sexually assaulted her, then mocked her by showing her the gun was only just a BB gun. He told her to drive the car. She drove erratically, hoping the police would pull them over. She drove to a friend's house, and after exiting the vehicle, she took down the plate number. Wallace was again arrested on February 25th, 1992, but was released on his own recognizance. He then fled to South Carolina before moving to Charlotte, where he got a job as a manager at Taco Bell. It was here, amongst the busy bustle of fast food, where Wallace met and stalked his victims, forming relationships that would ultimately lead to their demise. On May 27, 1992, Wallace picked up a sex worker in the Charlotte, North Carolina area. Her name was Sharon Nance. Sharon Nance was a mother of two, struggling with the past addiction of drugs and prostitution. After having sex with her, Wallace refused to pay. He proceeded to bludgeon her to death with a rock. He left her body beside the Roselle's Ferry Road, and she was the only victim that Wallace had not previously known. On June 15, 1992, Caroline Love went missing. She had been sharing a place with Wallace's girlfriend, Sadie McKnight. After getting a ride home from work from her cousin, Robert Ross, Caroline was not seen again until her body was found March 13, 1994, nearly 2 years after her disappearance. You see, Wallace had a key to her home, being that his girlfriend lived there as well. He was there when Caroline arrived. Wallace made sexual advances, and when Caroline rejected, he choked her into unconsciousness, bounded and gagged her. He sexually assaulted her while she was semi-conscious, and he would strangle her unconscious every time she began to wake up. Eventually, Wallace strangled Caroline to death. He put her body in an orange trash bag and dumped her in the woods near Statesville Road. Kathy Love, Caroline's sister, Wallace's girlfriend McKnight, and Wallace himself went to the police station and filed a missing report. Shauna Hawk was a beautiful 20-year-old college student and a Taco Bell employee. Unfortunately, Wallace was her manager. On February the 20th, 1993, Shauna's mother became concerned when she missed an appointment and she found her purse and other belongings still at home. She called the police. Upon searching her home, Shauna's body was found lifeless in the bathtub. An autopsy indicated blunt force trauma and ligature strangulation. Wallace sexually assaulted her, choked her to death, and put her in a water-filled bathtub. The worst part of it? Wallace attended her funeral, showing a chilling display of his audacity and lack of remorse. On June 23, 1993, Audrey Ann Spain failed to show up for her shift at Taco Bell. After messaging and calling her for days and driving by to see that her car was parked home, coworkers called 911. Police also got no response from Audrey. It wasn't until a maintenance worker entered her apartment that Audrey was discovered. She was gagged and strangled with a t-shirt, and a bra was also wrapped around her neck. While unconscious, Wallace raped her. She was then drugged to the shower to remove evidence. He then placed her in bed and stole a credit card. Wallace tried to cover his tracks by returning to the apartment and stealing her phone. He thought using the deceased woman's phone would make it seem like she was still alive. Valencia Jumper was in her senior year at Johnson C. Smith University studying political science, and she worked at Food Line. On August 9, 1993, she made plans with a friend, Zachary Douglas. When Zachary showed up, he saw smoke coming from her apartment. Her body was discovered in the early mornings of August 10th, burned in her bedroom. Wallace, who said Valencia was, quote, like a sister to him, unquote, attacked her. He sexually assaulted, strangled, and suffocated her with a towel. He dragged her body to the bed and poured rum all over her. He then proceeded to put a pot of beans on the stove and turn the stove on high and set her on fire. He even went as far as taking the battery out of the smoke detector now. It may have worked a bit, as the media initially reported she died falling asleep while cooking. Michelle Stinson was a mother of 2 young boys, a college student, and a friend that Wallace had met at Taco Bell. A friend of Michelle's, James Mays, stopped by her home, and her 2 children said through the window, Mama was sleeping on the kitchen floor. When Mays entered the home, he found Stinson dead. Mays picked up the phone, but realized the cord had been cut and snatched out of the wall. Wallace had arrived at the home, planning to rape and murder Stinson. She was stabbed 4 times in her back. The eldest son attested to seeing the killing, but he returned back to bed. Wallace wiped his fingerprints and fled the scene. Vanessa Mack lived in an apartment with her 2 young daughters and worked at Carolina's Medical Center. Barbara Rippey, the grandmother of Vanessa's eldest daughter, visited her home and found her dead in the bed. She had been hit and strangled with a long-sleeve pullover type shirt and a towel. Wallace planned to rob and murder Vanessa because he wanted money to buy cocaine. After sexually assaulting and strangling her, Wallace checked on Vanessa's baby and stayed until the babies went to sleep. Irony is, Vanessa gave Wallace the wrong ATM pin, so he wasn't able to get any money, making her murder all the more senseless. Betty Jean Bacum and Brandy June Henderson lived in the same apartment complex, and they were murdered on the same day. Wallace went to Brandy's apartment the morning of March 9, 1994, but decided to go to Betty Jean home to murder her instead because Brandy's boyfriend was home. When Betty Jean, an assistant manager at Bojangle, failed to show up for work, police were called. On March 10th, police found Betty Jean strangled in her home. She had been beaten, sexually assaulted, strangled, and had items taken from her home. Wallace held Bacum in a chokehold for nearly 30 minutes, demanding the combination to the safe at her job. He returned to the scene and wiped his fingerprints, stole her car, and set out to kill again. Brandy Henderson was now alone in her apartment with her newborn baby during the evening time of March the 9th. Her boyfriend, Vernon Lamar Woods, would return home to what would be a nightmare. He found his baby struggling for air, a pair of shorts wrapped tightly around his neck. After saving the baby, he noticed Brandy, who had been strangled with towels and already deceased. Wallace stole a TV, stereo, food, and some coins. To add to the gruesomeness, Wallace had raped Henderson while she held her newborn baby on her chest. By March the 10th, police investigators were connecting the Henderson, Mack, and Bakun murders to Wallace. On the 11th, police issued a warrant for his arrest, but it was too late to save his last victim. Deborah Ann Slaughter was a mother of 3 and a co-worker of Wallace's girlfriend. Deborah Ann was last seen on March 12, 1994. Her body was found by her mother in her apartment. Wallace sexually assaulted her and shoved a balled-up sock in her mouth. He strangled her with 2 towels and stabbed her 38 times with a knife that she kept in her purse for protection. Wallace left Deborah Ann's apartment. He bought some crack cocaine. Then he returned to the murder scene to smoke it. On March 12th, after police found Deborah Ann's body, they arrested Wallace. He had an outstanding larceny warrant. They were looking at him for multiple murders, and they used the outstanding warrant to finally get this monster off of the street. On March 13th, 1994, Wallace confessed to all 11 murders. However, prosecutors focused on the 11 cases with the strongest evidence for his trial. He was tried for the deaths of Caroline Love, Shauna Hawk, Audrey Spain, Valencia Jumper, Vanessa Mack, Betty Jean Bakun, Brandy Henderson, and Deborah Ann Slaughter. On January 7, 1997, Wallace was convicted of all charges. He was sentenced to death for each of the 9 murders. He was charged with 9 counts of first-degree murder, 8 counts of first-degree rape, and multiple counts of sexual assault. He was sentenced to death on January 9th. He also received 10 consecutive life sentences and an additional 322 years for crimes other than murder. No trials were held for the murders of Tashana Bethea and Sharon Nance. Wallace is currently incarcerated at Central Prison in Raleigh, North Carolina, awaiting execution. His case has sparked discussion about the treatment of Black victims in the criminal justice system and the importance of vigilance in the communities. As we close this episode, we remember the names of the women whose lives were taken too soon. Their stories are not forgotten. Tashonda, Sharon, Caroline, Shauna, Audrey Valencia, Michelle, Vanessa, Betty, Brandy, and Deborah. May their names forever echo in the Carolinas. My name is Imaje, and thank you for joining me on Carolina Echoes. Until next time. And don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe, all that. Thanks.